Republic of China, has extended an invitation to President Nixon to visit China.
In September of 1970, 5 aircrafts were hijacked by the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, a revolutionary group who wanted the release of Palestinian prisoners. The planes were brought to Dawson's Field near Zarqa, Jordan. After releasing all hostages but the 56 Jewish passengers, the PFLP detonated the empty aircrafts. After a war almost broke out amongst Jordan and a few Middle Eastern countries, the hostages were released and the PFLP were arrested. In 1971, China began contacting outside countries through the use of competitive sports. As a result, the U.S. ping pong team was invited for an exhibition match. It was the first time since 1949 an American had visited China. This new period of relations between the U.S. and China became known as ping pong diplomacy. This led to President Nixon's visit to Communist leader Mao Zedong and ultimately ended China's period of isolationism. In 1972, at the Olympic Games in Munich, West Germany, 11 members of the Israeli Olympic team were held hostage in their apartments by members of the Black September organization. The goal was for BSO members to be released from prison in both Israel and Germany. It was the first time the Olympic Games were suspended. All 11 members were killed, as well as 5 BSO members and 1 officer. The remaining BSO members were arrested soon after. The suspension was soon lifted, but the events of that day were not forgotten. On January 23, 1973, President Nixon announced an end to the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. The Paris Peace Accords called for a ceasefire between North Vietnam and South Vietnam. At this point, many Americans were fed up with the war. While the Vietnam War itself was not over, there was an end to direct U.S. involvement. A 60-day withdrawal period was established for the U.S. to leave Vietnam. However, fighting soon resumed later that year. In 1974, Patty Hearst was kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army, who wanted nothing less than to destroy the U.S. government. 2 months later, a video surfaced of Hearst saying she had joined the SLA. This was later shown on a security camera when Hearst robbed a bank with the SLA. The FBI launched one of its most massive manhunts in its history and arrested Hearst in San Francisco. After serving 2 years, President Carter pardoned her. The rest of the SLA were arrested. Saigon was the strongest city in all of South Vietnam and was said to be the most guarded. However, the Viet Cong managed to attack the city and rename it Ho Chi Minh City. Fighting broke out all over, even at the U.S. Embassy, where Americans tried to evacuate as quickly as possible. With Saigon fallen, it meant an end to the Vietnam War. In 1976, an Ebola virus outbreak began in Sudan and Zaire. The Ebola virus is an extremely hemorrhagic disease, which symptoms include fever, stomach pain, and internal bleeding. The name comes from the Ebola River, where it was said to be found. The disease killed 280 of the 318 people infected. The World Health Organization organized research teams to help subdue the disease. The last case died on November 5, 1976. The transfer of the disease was mainly between contaminated needles. Steve Biko was a civil rights activist in South Africa. He was arrested at a police roadblock and interrogated by officers of the Port Elizabeth Security Police. The interrogation was so bad that it lasted 22 hours and included torture and beatings resulting in a coma and major head injuries. Biko was taken to a prison hospital and died shortly afterwards. The police claimed that the cause of death was an extreme hunger strike, but an autopsy revealed multiple bruises and abrasions by his captors. In 1978, 912 people from the People's Temple in Guyana committed suicide. The leader, Jim Jones, convinced his followers to take poison. This was after Congressman Leo Ryan of California visited after hearing allegations that illegal activity was happening at the temple. It was revealed that people were forced to stay against their will. Ryan took anyone who wanted to leave, however, they were attacked at the airport and Ryan later died. On November 4, 1979, 52 Americans were held hostage for 444 days by a group of Islamist students in Tehran, Iran. The group had taken over the American embassy there. The hostage was seen as a blow to U.S.-Iran relations and its influence in Iran. The hostage went on for 2 more years until the hostages were finally released. In other news, Margaret Thatcher became the first woman Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. She would go on to lead Britain until 1990. She received the nickname Iron Lady over the years because of her strong will. She helped transform Britain's economy and become a formidable rival on the world stage.
Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
April 30th, 1970, President Richard Nixon announced a draft of 150,000 more soldiers to expand the Vietnam War effort after the invasion of Cambodia by the United States. Massive protests erupted throughout the country. In Ohio, protesters initiated a demonstration that set fire to the ROTC building. The governor, James Rhodes, sent 900 National Guards to respond to the incident. On May 4, 1970, an altercation broke out and 28 guardsmen opened fire, killing 4 students and injuring 9. In March of 1971, Congress passed the 26th Amendment, lowering the voting age from 21 to 18. The voting age debate began during World War II and continued to grow during the Vietnam War, when men were fighting for this country without ever being denied the right to vote. During the youth rights movement, the slogan was old enough to fight, old enough to vote. Necessary 34 states legislature drafted the 26th Amendment, and Nixon signed it into the law that July. Yeah. On June 17, 1972, several burglars were arrested inside the office of Democratic National Committee located in the Watergate building in Washington, D.C. Nixon swore the White House had no involvement, and he was re-elected. Once the Watergate conspiracy had finally become open in August 1974, Nixon resigned as president. His successor, Gerald Ford, pardoned him for all his crimes while in office. Nixon was never prosecuted for his crimes, but the Watergate scandal altered American political views. In 1973, the Supreme Court decision in Roe v. Wade case enabled women to have legal abortions. The ruling held that women have a right under the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution to decide whether to continue or terminate a pregnancy. Roe brought a class action suit challenging the Texas criminal abortion laws, which didn't allow abortions except on medical advice for saving the mother's life. This historic decision allows women to terminate a pregnancy during the first 2 trimesters. Only during the last trimester, when the fetus can survive outside the womb, will allow states to regulate abortion of a healthy pregnancy. On August 8, 1974, Nixon announces his resignation, becoming the first president in American history to resign from office. Impeachment proceedings were in process due to the involvement in the Watergate affair. Nixon was feeling pursued from Congress and the public to leave the White House. President Nixon had been aware of the cover-up in July. The existence of the Watergate tapes were revealed during the Senate hearings. There were official recordings of the White House conversation between Nixon and his staff. House Judiciary Committee adopted 3 articles of impeachment against Nixon: obstruction of the justice, abuse of presidential power, and hindrance of the impeachment process. On April 30th, 1975, the capital of South Vietnam, Saigon, fell to the North Vietnam forces. The fall of Saigon marked the end of the Vietnam War. U.S. forces in South Vietnam had been reduced, leaving the military of the South Vietnam to defend their country against the North. The South Vietnam Army was not able to withstand the advances of the North, and eventually Saigon fell to Communist forces. Evacuation of the staff from the U.S. embassy was difficult. The last Marines were taken out of the embassy by a Bell-Hue helicopter via the roof helipad. In 1976, Jimmy Carter was elected as the 39th President of the United States. He was the first presidential election after the Watergate scandal and the Vietnam War. Carter was relatively an unknown first-term governor of Georgia and essentially an outsider to Washington. This popular position it helped him run against Ford after the public losing trust in the government from the Watergate scandal and his pardon for Nixon. The election was held on November 2nd. The former governor won the electoral vote with 297 votes, 27 more than needed, and he won the popular vote by 2%. In 1977, Elvis Presley died in Memphis, Tennessee. He was 42 years old at the time. The death of the king of rock and roll brought many mourning fans to his home in Graceland. His mansion in Memphis, doctors stated that he died from a heart attack. However, it was likely brought on by his drug addiction to prescription of barbiturates. He was found unconscious in Graceland Mansion and rushed to the hospital where they pronounced him dead. Graceland continues to attract many fans and continues to be a tourist attraction. In 1978, Jonestown Massacre occurred. Jim Jones was an American cult leader who promised his followers a utopia in the jungles of South America. After facing accusations, he was illegally using the cult money for his own use. He needs hundreds of followers to begin with. On November 18th, he commanded his followers to drink cyanide punch. That's good enough. On November 4th, 1979, Iranian militias went into the United States massively in Tehran and kidnapped approximately 70 Americans. The terrorist act was the most profound crisis during Carter's presidency. The Iranians held American diplomats hostage for 440 days. On January 21st, 1981, just a few hours after Reagan's inaugural address, the remaining hostages were released.
Emmy winners for the decade were 1970 Outstanding Drama, The Bold Ones, The Senator on NBC, and Outstanding Comedy was All in the Family on CBS. 1971 Outstanding Drama was Masterpiece Theater, Elizabeth R., and Outstanding Comedy was All in the Family. 1972 Outstanding Drama Series, The Waltons, and Outstanding Comedy Series, All in the Family. 1973, the Outstanding Drama Series, Masterpiece Theater, Upstairs, Downstairs, and Outstanding Comedy, MASH. 1974, Outstanding Drama Series was Masterpiece Theater, Upstairs, Downstairs. Outstanding Comedy Series, The Mary Tyler Moore Show. In 1975, Outstanding Drama Series, The Police Story, and Outstanding Comedy Series, The Mary Tyler Moore Show. 1976, Drama Series, Masterpiece Theater, Upstairs, Downstairs, and Outstanding Comedy Series, The Mary Tyler Moore Show. 1977, Outstanding Drama Series, The Rockford Files, Outstanding Comedy Series, All in the Family. 1978, Outstanding Drama, Lou Grant, and Outstanding Comedy, Taxi. 1979, Outstanding Drama Series, Lou Grant, and Outstanding Comedy Series, Taxi. The Academy Award winners of the 1970s were 1970, Midnight Cowboy, Jerome Hellman. 1971, Patton, Frank McCarthy. 1972, The French Connection, Philip D'Antoni. 1973, The Godfather, Albert S. Ruddy. 1974, The Sting, Tony Bill, Michael Phillips, and Julia Phillips. 1975, The Godfather Part 2, Francis Ford Coppola, and produced by Gray Fredrickson. 1976, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Saul Zaentz and Michael Douglas. 1977, Rocky, Erwin Winkler and Robert Chartoff. 1978, Annie Hall, Charles H. Joff. 1979, The Deer Hunter, Barry Spikings, Michael DeLay, and Michael Camino. Grammy winners and Best Song through the decade were 1970, Bridge Over Troubled Water, Paul Simon. 1971, You've Got a Friend, Carole King. 1972, The First Time I Ever Saw Your Face, by Ewan McCall. 1973, Killing Me Softly with His Song, Norman Gimbel and Charles Fox. 1974, The Way We Were, Marilyn and Alan Bergman and Marvin Hamlish. 1975, Send in the Clowns, Stephen Sondheim. 1976, I Write the Songs by Bruce Johnston. 1977, there was a tie. 1, Love Theme from A Star is Born, Evergreen, Barbra Streisand and Paul Willings. And number 2, You Light Up My Life by Joe Brooks. 1978, Just the Way You Are by Billy Joel. In 1979, What a Fool Believes by Kenny Loggins and Michael McDonald. To lead off the 1970s, horse riding was extraordinary, with 3 Triple Crowns coming into play. This feat had never been repeated. The Kentucky Derby winners were Dust Commander in 1970. In 1971, Canonero II. In 1972, Rivera Ridge. In 1973, Secretariat, who was a Triple Crown winner. 1974, Cannonade. 1975, Foolish Pleasure. 1976, Bold Forbes. 1977, Seattle Slew, who also won the Triple Crown. 1978, Affirmed, who also won the Triple Crown as well. In 1979 was Spectacular Bird. Most importantly, Secretariat, who won by the most lengths during his Triple Crown performance in 1973. This record is still standing.
He is going to be the Triple Crown winner. Here comes Secretariat to the wire. An unbelievable, an amazing performance.
500 winners were Al Unser in 1970 and 71, Mark Donahue in 1972, Gordon Johncock 1973, Johnny Rutherford 1974, Bobby Unser in 1975, Johnny Rutherford in 1976, A.J. Foyt in 77, Al Unser in 1978, Rick Mears in 1979. On to real sports news. The NBA championships were dominant when speaking about the teams, most winning by 2 or 3 game leads. There were no outright winners of the 70s, however. The NBA championships were the New York Knicks winning in 1970, Milwaukee Bucks in 71, Los Angeles Lakers in 72, New York Knicks in 73, Boston Celtics in 74, Golden State Warriors in 75, the Celtics again in 76, the Portland Trail Blazers in 77, the Washington Bullets in 78, and the Seattle Supersonics in 79. In Major League Baseball news, Oakland, Pittsburgh, and the Yankees were most prevalent, having 2 wins in the decade of 1970. Pennant winners of the 70s were Baltimore in 1970, Pittsburgh in 1971, Oakland in 72, 73, and 74, Cincinnati in 75, and again in 76, Yankees in 77 and 78, and then Pittsburgh once again in 79. During the 1970s, the Steelers, Raiders, Colts, Chiefs, and Dolphins rounded out the championships. In 1970, Kansas City won. In 1971, Baltimore Colts won. In 72, the Dallas Cowboys won. In 73, Miami Dolphins won. In 74, the Dolphins won again. 75, Pittsburgh Steelers won. In 76, they won again. In 77, the Oakland Raiders won. In 78, the Dallas Cowboys won. And lastly, in 1979, the Steelers once again won, beating the Dallas Cowboys. Winter of 1976. The 76 Winter Olympics, officially known as the 22nd Olympic Winter Games, were a winter multi-sport event, which was celebrated from February 4th to 15th. 1976 was in Innsbruck, Austria, which is the second time the city hosted the Games. Following the horrific Munich massacre at the 1972 Summer Olympics, security was tight. Dorothy Hamill of the United States won the gold in figure skating. Austria favorite Franz Klammer won the men's downhill event in alpine skiing. Golds and silver, missing the third gold by 0.13 seconds. The USSR won its fourth straight ice hockey gold medal for the second consecutive Olympics. Canada refused to send a team this year.
Interalin plus T. Shirts in Terraline cotton.
Now on to fashion trends. The decade began with a continuation of the hippie look from the 1960s. Jeans remained frayed, and the tie-dye shirts and Mexican peasant blouses were still popular. The top fashion models in the 1970s were Lauren Hutton, Marcus Hemingway, Cheryl Tiegs, and Jerry Hall. 1970. Dresses called middies, maxis, and miniskirts were very popular in this year. Middies are dresses that go down to about your calves. Maxis are dresses that go all the way down to your ankles. Miniskirts are skirts that were above your knees. Men wore mostly suits in the 1970s, but when they weren't, they were wearing tunics, which was a very stylish vest in the early 1970s. April 22nd, 1970 was the first Earth Day, with over 10,000 students participating in over 2,000 colleges and universities. Lava lamps also came out and were a hit for everyone, mainly kids and young adults. 1971. Dresses were still in style in the year 1971, except there were different styles of maxis, middies, and miniskirts. A lot of the dresses tended to keep getting shorter though. Corduroy jeans came into fashion this year too. There were flare-legged jeans and no-whale cotton. Corduroy for a smooth, velvety look. Made for women to wear most of the time. Turtlenecks and sport coats came in the style for men around this time also. The first email was transmitted during this year, which made communicating for businesses and works a lot easier than sending by mail. 1972. This year, the most commonly worn outfit was known as the jumpsuit. Worn by both genders, these were one-piece outfits that you step into and zip up. Dresses with slits in the front became very popular around this time too. They were worn for formal wear. Men wore button-up jackets. On November 8, 1972, HBO became the nation's first paid pay-per-view channel on television. This sparked the rise of other paid television programs like Max, Showtime, and Encore. 1973. Men started to wear sports coats a lot more, and the slacks came into style around this time. Pullover sweaters were starting to become popular, and also the wool coats for both genders. April 3rd, 1973, Martin Cooper of Motorola became the first person to ever transmit a phone call on a cell phone. Cell phones were being used a lot more to make calls in this year. The term streaking was created during this year. It happened frequently, mostly at sporting events, though. 1974. In this year, hoods on jackets have finally been invented, known as hooded coats and cardigans. For men, sports shirts became very popular, and they were made out of very light material and colorful in most cases. Plaid shirts also became popular in this year. This was a year known as the bike boom. It was a year where more bikes were sold than cars. Transportation by car was getting to be too costly after the war. 1975. Fleecy numerical sweatshirts or jersey came in the fashion industry this year. Also, a lot more long dresses and cardigans were seen in this year. Hooded sweatshirts, currently known as hoodies, were a big hit during this year. Mood rings were made in 1975. It was able to tell your mood based off your body temperature. 1976, the Fonz jacket, the biggest fashion hit in the decade, was during this year. Tunics and pullovers were still in style and growing slowly. Also, they created slacks made out of polyester. The fad of the pet rock came into effect during this year. They sold nearly 1.5 million rocks. They were normal rocks like you found outside. The only difference is they were put in rocks and sold for money. 1977, nylon jackets became the fashion trend today. They are most commonly called winter jackets. Also, another fashion trend during this year was a hooded sweater. Jumpsuits started becoming popular again, but not as big as they were before. 1978, fashion knits, shirts, and pants. They were most commonly worn to discos and other special events that involved partying. Also, Star Wars pajamas were also a big hit for families all over America. Blouses and pantsuits were a huge trend for women during this time. 1979, V-neck dresses, tube tops, colorful jeans, and denim overalls were all fashion statements during 1979 for women. A lot of the major trends that carry in the 1980s that started in the late 1970s for men is slacks, blazers, suits,